Great. So good to see you all today, and thanks so much. I'm glad you're able to be here. So um, uh, I wanted to share some thoughts today on this topic of division and unity and conflict and peace, or conflict and harmony. The interplay between these division, unity, and conflict and peace. Interesting, just a personal milestone today is the 8-year anniversary of my leaving life as a monk. So I'd spent about 15 years as a monk before, and then not been in that role for the last 8 years. But yeah, so it's interesting, the way that life unfolds. And so one of the, so just to sort of set up this conversation about division and unity and so forth, I want to start by just saying a few words about this, then we'll do some meditation together, and then I'll share a little bit more at length on this topic. But our minds are always, well, we're thinking. That's what we do, right? And there's different kinds of thinking. There's different levels of thinking. There's our sensory awareness that's happening all the time. There are unconscious levels of thinking, or whatever you want to call that. I don't know if it's thinking or not. But normally when we talk about thinking, we're talking about our conscious thinking. And generally we're talking about what we call conceptual minds, these idea of concepts. And so conceptual minds are sometimes called discursive thought. It's kind of a fancy term. It just means like giving a discourse. Basically, it just means talking to yourself. So if I'm not talking out loud to you, I'm quite possibly talking to myself in my head, like, oh, thinking about this, thinking. And so our thinking is very closely associated with our speaking. It's very closely associated with the words, very closely associated with concept. So what's a concept? It's basically like a word. I gave this illustration last week or recently. I can talk about the universe and tell you all about the characteristics of the universe. I can talk about the planet. I can talk about the city of San Diego, myself. I can talk about a cell. I can talk about an atom. And I can do all of those things just as easily because they're all just words. They're all just concepts. And so no matter how much, other stuff you might group into that category of the universe, we can deal with it just with one concept, with one thought. And that's the way concepts work. Concepts work by throwing away all the details. And when I refer to the universe, what specifically am I referring to? Oh, it doesn't matter. Oh, the universe, right? I'm throwing away all the details, just giving one word. And so if I talk about a person or anything, what we're doing when we make a conception, all we're doing is we're making a distinction between this and that. And I can talk about a person, my friend Bob, and all that I really need to do is distinguish Bob from everything that's not Bob. And then I can refer to Bob. You just need to know the difference, the boundary between this and that. Like, what technically is the difference between San Diego and Tijuana, which is a sister city in Mexico? Well, you just need to know there's some boundary, there's some division. But the reason that's significant is that these concepts and the way we think and the way we speak, they're naturally misleading. They're very useful because it allows us to communicate about things like Bob and San Diego and so forth. We can communicate about those things, but it's very deceptive, right? Because if I refer to Bob, I know nothing about him really, aside from his name, and I can distinguish him from other people. And at that point, once you know something's name and you can tell it apart from other things, we say we know that thing, right? And that's the way all of our thinking works. And so when we think, we are just by definition dividing the world, right? And we can make these fine distinctions. You think about all the fine distinctions people make in whatever area they're interested in. If you're interested in wine, you can make all these fine distinctions. You make fine distinctions between different religious groups or different technologies, or whatever. And we feel that those are meaningful, but similarly, our mind can unify things and group things together. Like um, we can say all of us are people. You know, all of our pains are similar in the fact that in the fact that they're all pain and so forth. But we should know that these distinctions and the unification, they're all created by mind. They're all just concepts. So whether things are one, whether they're multiple, is all created by mind. Why do you care? Why am I going into this? Because as soon as we create a distinction between things, we also begin to have preferences between this and that. And we can also begin to fight, right? We can begin to fight, argue, create divisions. And so we have a lot of conflict in our own mind because of the stories that we tell, right? We have conflict based first on the idea that we have a lot of conflicts, but one of the main thing that where conflicts arise is our relationships with other people, whether we respect those other people or disrespect them or admire them, want to be like them, or want them to disappear. And all of those divisions or distinctions are based on the concept, for example, that we're all different from one another. And it can be very useful to recognize everybody is different, you know, to identify this person and know their name and where they came from and tell them apart from other people. But often it's quite problematic because these divisions that we make between people, they feel like they're real. And that's one of the tricky and problematic things about when we give words to things, and our thought is that we mistake our thought for reality. For example, I can close my eyes and I can be thinking about my room and what I like and what I don't like and so forth. But at that point, I'm just dealing with these concepts. I'm not really dealing with very closely with the felt or experienced reality of things. And if I'm thinking about, for example, my coworkers, I've got this phenomenon where there's certain people where when I'm spending time with them, I like them. We have a nice relationship. So, but if I stop spending time with them and I'm just thinking about them afterwards, like I have these thoughts arising, like, I don't like them, or I don't like the way they think or do this stuff. And it's very strange. It's puzzling for me. Like, why such big differences in my mind? And it really all comes down to the stories that I'm telling myself about them, what they're like, how they're different from me, what I'm like. The stories they all always vary, but they tend to have a theme like I'm right and they're wrong. It seems to be a recurring theme that I've noticed in my mind. Just statistically, I probably should be right no more than 50% of the time. Just odds are. But in my imagination, I seem to be right a lot more than that. And other people seem to be wrong a lot, less, a lot more than 50% as well. And it's interesting because I feel like I'm so different from these people, right? I feel like I'm here and they're there, and they're off being wrong, and I'm here being right, and there's no real relationship or connection between them. But if we think, there's a lot of ways you could approach this. But if you just think from a biological point of view, we're all basically the same human beings. We're like penguins. We're indistinguishable from one another. If you were from a different species, you'd find all penguins indistinguishable. I find all penguins indistinguishable. If you were a non-human, you'd find all humans basically indistinguishable. Oh, they're all the same. They all like sweet food, and they all complain about things. They talk a lot, seem to build a lot of structures. And, we're all basically genetically more or less identical, culturally largely identical, but rather than focusing on the, and so if for example, but one of the interesting things about humans is that once they're born, they can get up and walk around and go places, and they really look different from one another, as opposed to grass, for example. When grass sprouts, it doesn't move anywhere. It stays basically where it was rooted, and it's genetically all identical, but it looks like when you see a field of grass, you just see it as one field. You're not really distinguishing each individual blade of grass. We just, our brain sees them. Technically, every blade is an independent individual organism, more or less. But we see it as just one, right? Our brain just unifies all of that. Oh, it's just grass, just a field, right? But humans, it's like we're leaves that grew from a tree and then popped off the tree and started walking around and acting very independently. But we're basically all still connected to this tree of life. Sounds quite poetic, but we're all still connected to this shared biology, this shared culture, this shared foundations. And so, sometimes when people talk, like there's this, if it sounds a little bit hippie-ish to say that we're all one, right? But you can see all human beings as one. And it's an extraordinarily useful conception, because at that point, you relax a lot, because all of the fighting and the disharmony and the conflict dies down. Or you can see people as different, and that's fine, and that's useful because you know their names and their individual stories. But we need the ability to flex our mind, see everybody as one, see them all as different. But what happens, we tend to get very stuck in certain concepts. We tend to get stuck in certain stories. And so what we're doing in meditation is we're really learning to just get unstuck and to tell different stories, more useful stories, for example, stories about the similarity and the connection between all of us, as opposed to divisions. So I've talked more here at the outset than I exactly intended to, but hopefully that's set us up to spend a bit of time in meditation on this topic. But so when we're meditating, the meditations that I guide here tend to have two parts. First, just meditating on our body, becoming aware of our body and our breathing. And then second, beginning to think about our friends, family, colleagues, social connections, people around us, and reflecting, especially with gratitude, a feeling of gratitude on the human connections around us, or the connection of other beings around us. But even as we're going through the breathing meditation, we can think, is this one process? Like breathing, is it one continuous, constant process, or is it multiple processes? Is each breath independent of each other, or are they all one? I don't know. They're both concepts. What's the reality? It depends. You can see it all as one, like there's no point at which my lungs are fully ever empty, or you can see each breath is independent. Again, the mind creates these divisions, unity, divisions, unity. The body itself, is it one, or is it four, or is it, what is it, 37 trillion cells, I think? 37 trillion cells, human cells. All kinds of non-human beings living in this space as well, bacteria and so forth. Is the body one, or is it many? It's totally just a concept. So we can spend a bit of time in meditation and just to restore some inner peace and to begin to feel that sense of just relaxation and peace, but also as an opening to wisdom. So for our meditation, the main point is we sit comfortably in a posture where we're confident we won't fall asleep. And we take a deep breath in and out. And then another breath in and out, and just invite ourselves to relax. And then another breath, and we just ask ourselves, what is important right now? We just begin to feel our body, the sensations throughout our body. Perhaps you feel some relaxation, and probably we feel our breathing. So, in this meditation, we're meditating on our whole body, but our breath is the moving part, a little bit easier to pay attention to. So, as we breathe in and out, we can just ask ourselves, is the breath one or is it many? And typically, our mind will wander off with a lot of thoughts. We can return to the feeling of our breath in our body. then we can begin to bring to mind the people in our life, recalling our parents, friends, colleagues, neighbors, animals, anyone who's influenced us throughout our life. We can think, good or bad, I wouldn't be here now without all of these people. I'm a product of my parents, my society, these influences. Without these beings, I wouldn't be here now. We generate a feeling of gratitude. Again, we can ask, are we really different from these people, or are we one? We can know that these people are in our memory. They're not even here physically. So the people in our memory, are they one with us, or are they different? last minute or so, develop a wish to use this brief time to increase our capacity to help others, to repay the kindness we've received throughout our life. Then we can open our eyes to rise from our meditation.